What's up, big dogs? Today we have our next how-to video that I'm very happy to show you all, and that is, of course, if you can't tell by the title already, is the Charizard EX, and it also includes the Mega Charizard EX, but it's how to play Charizard EX. Now, you may be thinking, why in the world would you make a how-to video for Charizard when it only has about 3 more months before it rotates out? And the simple answer is, I think this deck is extremely viable right now. Specifically, I think this is probably one of the better metas we've ever had for Charizard EX besides its prime, and it's all due to some key cards we've got in Phantasmal Flames. I've been playtesting this deck on my stream as well as doing some in live testing, and I think this deck is really good when it doesn't brick. Now, of course, Charizard still has that same issue I feel like it has every single time, and it is that it just bricks sometimes. Sometimes you look at your hand and it's awful. But I know another problem that a lot of people had with the deck was the Badoo factor, right? Sometimes you get Badooed and you just can't do anything. Well, there is a very nice supporter in Phantasmal Flames that really helps with that Badoo matchup. We're going to go over that in this video. Of course, thank you all for liking, commenting, subscribing. Getting a lot of love for these how-to videos, so I do plan on doing one every other week, so make sure you are tuning in for those. Also, make sure you're tuning in to our Christmas giveaways that we're doing for all the month of December. Make sure you're tuning into the streams and our YouTube videos to make sure that if you won, you will be notified, and don't miss that notification, because we're just giving away stuff this month. So very excited for that. But let's get into the video. Let's get into Charizard EX. Now, Charizard has been in the meta, of course, for quite some time. As you can see with its top placements, it has 104 regional top 8s, including 20 wins. And then internationally, top 8s has 16, including 4 wins. So this deck has been a huge meta contender for a while. It definitely took a dip in the past couple months where you were kind of trying to play it to beat Guardy, but a lot of the Gardevoir players didn't care if you played it. So it was always in that weird, middle area, I feel like, where the deck was good, but not great. The deck had good matchups, but it had really bad matchups, so on and so forth. And I think the reason I wanted to make this video specifically with Charizard is it's gotten quite a bit better with some of the new support we've got. As you can see, I've listed 3 of the newer Phantasmal Flame support that we got, which is, of course, the new Mega Charizard X. That card is good in its own degree. I do think right now it's not that great. Unfortunately, I was playtesting with it, and I was like, yeah, this card just doesn't come up unless you play the choreo stuff. And I think that stuff just kind of okay right now, but I do see a reason to play this in the future. So don't give up hope just yet. And then, of course, the big supporter that we got from this set, which is Dawn. Dawn is so good in this deck. If you are not playing a high count of Dawn, I think you're doing it incorrectly. I was actually on the fence. I thought for a while, I knew this deck would always play 1 to 2 Dawn, but I was on the fence for a while about being okay, you're going to play 1 Dawn because you're going to go grab it with Pidgeot, or you're going to go grab it with Noctowl, and then add it to your hand, and then use it that 1 turn, and then, really plus off it. But the big thing about Dawn is how you just get to beat Badoo with this. The new Charmeleon that you get is a 1 fire energy cost attack that will knock out the Badoo, as well as you can get the Noctowl, you can get the Dusk line, you can get the Pidgeot line. You play so many stage 2s lines in this deck. There's so much you can get off this. Plus, there's a lot of good basic Pokemon you play as well. So Dawn is just so good in this deck. And then, of course, the Moltres is kind of our 1 prize attacker replacement for that Chi we were using. That card has seen some play and kind of had mixed results. Some people really like it, some people don't. I do think it is worth testing, but above all, you should be playing Dawn for sure. And then for the top placements here, we have, of course, the regional Stugart. Is that Studart? I don't know. I can hardly speak regular English, let alone a different language. So you all will have to forgive me. But we had Nikolai Steborg, who placed first with the Charizard that a lot of people have been hyping up. And then, of course, we also had at Milwaukee before Phantasmal Flames, we had Jackson Ford, who got first place with Charizard Pidgeot. And then Brisbane, a little bit after that, right before rotation, or excuse me, not rotation, before Phantasmal Flames, which was Waipon Mach playing the Zard Pidgeot as well. So this deck, of course, has had really good placements here recently, which is a good sign, right? We see like all of these old placements and how good it's been. But if you look past this, before all this, the placements were not as great as you were hoping for, right? But now this deck is definitely on the up and up, and it's because of these supporter cards that we're seeing. But let's go over the matchups from a data perspective. Again, I don't think the data tells the full story. So don't look at just some of these numbers and think, oh, well, it must have a bad matchup against X deck because, you know, the data says so. That's not always the case. For example, for the Zoroark here, it has 33 wins, which is more than its losses and its ties, but only has a 47%. And that's because it's including those ties as a non-win, which, you know, isn't a win. It is a tie. But, you know, that does play in factor with some of the numbers. And this is a low amount of the numbers as well. I went to Trainer Hill and took more of the top placements for decks that were playing in like top 64 of events. So I didn't take just every single occurrence that happened between this deck and that deck. You know, I tried to take more of a sample size of everything. But again, the numbers don't say everything, but let's look at the matchups and see where this deck struggles. So as you can see in the matchups, the notable good matchups that we have is, of course, that Gardevoir. We do have the darkness weakness against it. So that is something that we truly benefit on. Now, Gardevoir players, some of them will tell you at least that it's not a bad matchup. I don't know how I feel about that because I feel like on paper it's definitely a bad matchup, but then again, Gardevoir is so busted. It would not surprise me if Gardevoir players actually felt that way. So definitely something to look out for. You definitely still need to learn the matchup pretty well. Another good matchup is Cerulege. Cerulege is kind of fallen off a little bit just due to some more support that's been coming out. But the main thing with Cerulege is it just can never really hit that Charizard number of the high HP that it has with the 330. And if you get a Charizard early, which you usually can, the only reason you can is usually because you get Badooed. But in this version, you definitely can. And also, we're also playing the Wellspring and like the Terra versions that are able to knock out some of these decks that play the more higher count of the baby Pokemon like Gardevoir, like Cerulege. So definitely have advantage of that. And then also the knocked out decks. The knocked out decks just don't have a good answer to the Charizard. You know, sometimes they'll try to take in like an Iron Leaves or another grass Pokemon like the Till Mask. But if you know the matchup well, you can kind of just play around those cards, or you can just put them at such a disadvantage that they're unable to catch up after you take the first two prize turn. Especially if you're also playing Wellspring, if you're playing the Terra Box version, you can really aggro your opponent and make their life a lot harder. And then, of course, the notable bad matchups we have, which I do think some of these have changed quite a bit, and I'll get into that in just a second. But, of course, Dragapult, even with the Badoo counter that we have, the Dragapult damage spread is just too much for this deck sometimes. We do have a better chance, I will say, than previous metas. I feel like previous metas, it was legit like a 70-30 matchup, and now it feels more like a 60-40. It's definitely a lot more manageable because we have stuff like the Dawn that helps us get out of the Badoo lock. I do think Charizard has gotten a lot better in this matchup specifically. It honestly wouldn't surprise me if after a couple more tech cards or maybe some more key ways for finding out how to play against the deck that it gets even better. Then, of course, the Mega Box or anything really that tries to play a Cornerstone. The Cornerstone theory or theorem is always like a big deal. It's like if people are expecting the Cornerstone, it's bad. But if people aren't expecting the Cornerstone, it's really good. So it's like, does the Charizard player respect Cornerstone enough to play tech to beat it? For example, are you going to play the Charizard X just to beat a Cornerstone? Or are you going to play, I know like Tord was playing like Lopunny. Are you going to play something like Mega Lopunny to beat a cornerstone in your deck? I'm not sure. I prefer some of the more Terra options if you're going to play Terra Box, like, for example, not just the Water Ogerpon, but Terapagos as well, just kind of beats Cornerstone on its own. But even with that, Mega Box can still kind of pressure the Zard with its high HP. It's very hard for Zard to get a lot of knockouts against the Mega Pokemon at the beginning of the game. And then also they play the Psyduck, so you're not able to pop your Ghost like you want to. And if you put any damage on them, they are going to just move counters and then do the first Absol attack to just get an automatic KO on some of your key cards. And then the Grimmsnarl, of course. The Grimmsnarl is another deck that kind of spreads damage to the bench, which Charizard doesn't like. And it also plays De-Evolution. And Charizard is known to really spam out rare candies to get going quickly. And if you are not careful with your rare candies, Grimmsnarl will just punish you to death to where you can't recover at all. And Grimmsnarl plays fast enough that it can catch up to your speed pretty well. And we play stuff like a high count of Arven, Secret Box, that's pretty easy to get that Devo. So it's definitely something that you have to look out for. And we can't just knock out a Grimmsnarl like normally, like we would with a lot of other decks where we can just either boss up a low HP support Pokemon and knock it out. Grimmsnarl doesn't really play stuff like that. And it's also going to be pressuring you with damage with the Frostlass and Monkey Dories. So that's another kind of type matchup that Charizard will struggle against, and it's really because of these main cards. But even all these bad matchups, I think most of them are very manageable, especially with the new stuff that we have to beat Cornerstone. If you're willing to play that, I do think these bad matchups are manageable. Then we're going to get into our first list. I do have 3 lists for you all today. If a deck has different versions of it, I like to go over all the different versions the same way I did with Holt. But if it doesn't really have different versions, I won't really go after them. Like the Mega Absol doesn't really have a different version, just different key cards you play. But this one does. And so we're going to start out with the one that people are probably most familiar with, and that is the Charizard Pidgeot deck list. As you can see, we're playing a high count of Ghost. The Pidgeot line, we're playing a Klefki, so we are able to pop our Ghost if they play the Psyduck. We're playing a Shaman to protect us from that damage spread that, for example, like Grimmsnarl does, Water Ogerpon does, just stuff to kind of keep them away from that. This version is playing the Chi-Yu. This is a little bit of an older list, but you can also just put in the Moltres there if you think it's better, just whichever one you think. We're playing a high count of like Lilies, Arven, Iono to really make sure that we're going through our deck, and also Dawn. This version also is probably the best with Briar because we're able to search for the Briar off the Pidgeot, pop a Dust to get the prize mapping to how we want it, use the Briar, and then get a big KO and then win the game. And then including if you're playing something like Max Belt, it kind of guarantees that we're always going to get that KO. But a pretty standard line besides this with 3 Rare Candy, 3 Ultra Ball, 2 Super Rod because we do go through resources pretty quickly, Counter Catchers because we do like to be behind the TM Evo to get our bigger stage Pokemon up and going, the Artisan to get Pokemon on board, and then the Fire Energy we don't need a lot because of our Infernal Rain, and then the Jet Energy, which allows us to like move up the Klefki, move up some other key Pokemon that we need in the active to kind of get some of those abilities turned off with the Mischievous Lock. But some notes for the Pidgeot build specifically. The Pidgeot setup is your #1 priority. If you want to win, you need Pidgeot. A big reason that you're going to win some of your bad matchups is because you have Pidgeot. I know when I'm playing like Polt against Zard, my #1 priority is to knock out the Pidgeot line. If I can, sometimes I can't because they go Pidgeot quickly. But if I'm able to, I like to go after the Pidgeot line and knock it out, just because the later in the game, when you really need that one card to like seal the game, you're not going to be able to get it as easy because you don't have the Pidgeot line. So if you want to win your games, it's definitely your priority. But also don't forget that, leaving only one Charmander on the board is probably not smart either, because your opponent's just going to go after that. And where you are stage 2 deck, it will put you behind at least an additional turn. And that's if you get rare candy and stuff. And then speaking of rare candy, be careful using rare candy against decks that run Devo. It is a lot easier to break a board if you're rare candy your main pieces. So where we are trying to rare candy a lot in this deck, Grimmsnarl decks that play like Devo or like the Jelly Guardy that plays Devo will try to abuse that. And they'll let you set it up. They'll spread damage with the Monkey Doors, and then they'll just go ahead and Devo you. And then you're so far behind, you just can't catch up. The Briar plays the best in this deck, specifically setting up Briar after popping Ghost and then adding the card with Pidgeot is very good. So a lot of the times, the reason that Terra decks are not playing Briar is because you don't have the setup for it. Well, Pidgeot lets us skip that step and lets us just get the Briar or get an additional piece with the Briar that lets us either pop a Ghost, do a Charizard attack with the Briar to win, being down, 3-2, or even if we're down, let's say it's 3-3, we pop the Ghost, bam, now we can activate Briar. Or we can pop a Ghost, knock out something, and then, you have so many tools and so many ways to win with the Briar in this version specifically. It's a very good card to play. So the deck, of course, struggles against damage spreading attacks. It is very important that you have multiple Charmanders ready to go or a Shaman. So if you are playing against those decks like the Water Ogerpon, like the Grimmsnarl, you're going to probably want to consider Shaman. I'm not saying you have to run Shaman. It's not like a have to, but you are going to play in bigger events that are going to be filled with players that are playing Grimmsnarl, that are playing the Water Ogerpon index. Even in Charizard, they're playing Water Ogerpon. So it's definitely something I would consider. The deck is very flexible due to how versatile Pidgeot is. You can take this build specifically to beat the meta. Make sure you have a good understanding of what will be at an event and take accordingly. So, of course, because we have that quick search, we can search whatever card we want. A lot of times you won't play certain cards in decks because you just don't have an easy way of getting them. For example, stadiums are not that easy to get unless you play something like a Chorus Tenacity, which not a lot of decks want to play. So because of that, we can play different techs that aren't easily found by just naturally drawing them or adding them with a certain effect or a certain ability. We can do that with Pidgeot because Pidgeot lets us get anything that we want. And the deck has the potential to be the best for the last 4 months of its life due to Dawn and how easy the Briar play is to set up. Again, I think this version is very good. I think it should be either between this version or the Terra Box version, or not Terra Box, but Charizard, I guess is what they call it, version. I definitely think you should consider between those two. I did include a third version that we'll go over here in just a second, but I do think for the last 3 to 4 months of this deck's life, it is going to be, either S tier or high A tier. I do think it's that good, and I'll go over kind of the rating at the end of this video. So here is the probably the ugly duckling of the Zards, and that is the Zard Pult. I know I went over this in my Dragapult guide as well, but kind of just wanted to go back over it and show you all some of the cards. This is kind of playing a higher Dracloak line because we do want to draw with the Dracloak, and then we're only really playing supporters like Hawlucha, which works with Pult, Monkey Dory, which kind of works with Pult, and then the Fezandipity to just get a draw, and then the Moltres because we are playing a high amount of attack, and this one also plays GU, so just something else to consider. This version also only plays one Dawn, which is kind of surprising, but I don't think Dawn is that great in Pult like decks. I've been playing one Dawn in mine, and it kind of feels underwhelming sometimes. It's definitely a lot better in more Charizard oriented decks, but then we're playing the normal stuff like 4 Buddy Buddies, 3 Ultra Balls, 2 Counter Catchers, 2 Super Rods, 2 Rare Candies, and then this is playing the ace spec of an Unfair Stamp. I'm still not that high on an Unfair Stamp right now, but it's probably one of the better techs for this deck specifically. And then just basic tools like the Balloon and Evolution that we're going to use, and then a basic energy line. Pretty set for this is pretty the normal Zard Pult list. It's not really changed quite a bit. The deck trades consistency with firepower. You have really good attacking Pokemon, but not consistent. So we take out a lot of the one of tech cards. So because we don't play Pidgeot with like the quick search, and we don't really have stuff that searches through our deck, we're doing more drawing than searching. We have to take out a lot of those one-ofs just because they're not probable that we're going to see, except if they're Pokemon, because we can always add them with like our opponent's Artisan or like an Ultra Ball or stuff like that. We just kind of take those out and prefer more consistent pieces because we lose consistency when we're playing another stage 2 type deck that doesn't play more of a support role. It plays more of an attacking role, while it also does allow you to draw cards. They're just not as frequent, right? We still have a draw engine with the Dracoloak. We just can't pick what we get like most builds, like I was saying. Because of that, we're going to play less tech-like cards. We're going to play more standard cards. We have high amounts of the same supporters, so that tends to help us draw into what we need. So if we're playing a high amount of the same supporters, except of course that one Dawn, we're going to more likely see those when we're drawing through our cards, or see multiples of those. So we want to see stuff like the Lilies early, Iono, Arven, you know, just when we need to see those cards. The Arven after our opponent gets a KO, so we can do that unfair stamp play. We're going to see those more often because we're playing more higher amounts of those supporters. So unfortunately, this deck also struggles even more against decks that spread damage to the bench because we are playing Creepies that have 70 and Dracoloaks that have 90. So the Grimstar players will definitely eat off your Dracoloaks because they also get the Frostlass counters. So we do have to pay attention to that. And also because we are playing more of this stuff, people are going to be going after them more often with like Water Ogre Pawn. So if they see that you have like 2 Manders and then 2 Dreepies, they're going to just figure out which one they want to deal with and then knock out the other 2 is what they usually do, which then makes us just a Dragapult deck or a Zard deck, but a worse version. But in theory, you want to do Dragapult early and Charizard late because it's a very nice combo. If we get the Dragapult going early and we're doing 200 and doing 60 spread, you know, our opponent can't really sit behind stuff like you can against Zards or other Zard variants. The big thing with Zard is that it's kind of linear in its attacks, and Dragapult helps us with that because we have the spread damage. It's very good to combo with like the one-up Monkey Dory and stuff like that. It helps us get multiple KOs in one turn. That kind of puts pressure on our opponent to go after our cards. And if they're knocking out our cards, then Charizard only gets better and better and better with its attack. So, you know, the Dragapult early, Charizard late, really good combo. It's definitely something that you want to go for every time you're playing this. And then multiple ace specs can work in this deck. I think Secret Box is good. I think Unfair Stamp is good. I saw some lists with Neo Upper. Definitely should play around if you're wanting to play this list with your ace spec to see which one you prefer. I think Unfair Stamp is not a great card, but I think it's good in this version specifically. So it's just something to take in consideration. And then the list probably the most of you all are excited for is, of course, the Charizard deck list. This is the list that just won Stuart. And you can see it's a lot of one-ofs, but they're all good one-ofs, right? So we have, of course, the regular Zard line, the 2-2, or the 3-1-2 line. We have a 3-3 knockdown line. We have a 1-1-2 Pidgeot line, which is, or excuse me, 2-2 Pidgeot line. Does not play Pidgeotto. That is important to know. And because we're not playing that, we're going to have to play a higher count of course, Rare Candy, which we play 4 of. Then we have the 2 Duskull, 1 Dusclops, 1 Dusknoir, like most Dragapults are running. And then he's playing 2 Terapagos instead of the Water Ogre Pawn. I know a lot of versions are playing Terapagos and a Water Ogre Pawn, or just the Water Ogre Pawn. Nicola decided to play 2 Terapagos, which was very interesting. And then also 2 Fan Rotom to kind of pair with the Pidgey line and the Hoot Hoot Knockdown line. And then we're also playing Pheasantipity for draw, and then Klefki because we do want to pop our ghosts and we don't want to be stopped by stuff like Psyduck. We can also trap stuff like the Latios and the Active, and then that's a free, easy KO for our Charizard when we're ready to do the KO. And then, of course, 4 Dawn in this list. The reason we're playing 4 Dawn is because we don't want to lose 2 Badoo, and this deck is so susceptible to losing 2 Badoo. The only thing that does suck is if we don't see one of those Dawn after we get Iono Badooed. It's very hard for us to get our board established because we're not playing stuff like the Pidgeotto. We're only playing 1 Charmeleon. You know, we're kind of, at this point, we're kind of hoping that we see a Knockdown, right? That's our main goal, is to find a Knockdown and add the cards that we need. But then again, the Knockdown is going to be adding the Dawn. It's not going to be adding your items. So we have to put that in consideration. But we play the 4 Dawn and then +3 Noctowl. We should have a good chance of getting to that. And then a very low supporter count after that. We just play 2 Iono, 2 Boss's Orders, and then the 1 Briar, which is very, very good in this deck because we can abuse the Briar with Charizard and also Terapagos. We have the 4 Buddy Buddy Puffin, 4 Nest Ball, which is very weird in a Charizard list. The 4 Rare Candy, only 1 Ultra Ball. We are playing that Dawn to add our bigger Stage 1 and 2 Pokemon. The 1 Super Rod, 1 Night Stretcher, a Prime Catcher, which really pairs well with the Terapagos specifically. And we can also just get whatever we want, put the Pidgeot up, and then do a free retreat. That's also something we can use it for, but it definitely pairs well with the Terapagos. You can definitely tell he built to attack with Terapagos just as well as he could with Zard, and I really like that. Then the 2 Area Zero, 5 Basic Fire Energy, and then the 2 Jet Energy to kind of combo with our Klefki and also our Terapagos. So the notes for Charizard, this version is what people are predicting will be the best version of the deck. I think it's already made that round. People are still going back and forth between this and Pidgeot. What's the best way to play it? I think it's Charizard. I can definitely be convinced otherwise. You know, definitely think Charizard is definitely at least, if not the best, right behind the Pidgeot version. The Wellspringer's attack is so good right now. Paired with the Noctowl, it's a very deadly combo. So the list I showed you doesn't play the Wellspring, but a lot of these Terra versions are playing Wellspring, and they're playing stuff like a Sparkling Crystal, kind of like what Terra Box does. And with pairing that with the Noctowl, you know how good the Wellspring attack is with Noctowl getting either like a Crispin and a Sparkling Gem, getting a 2 prize knockout at the very start of your game is very good. But the version that just won didn't play Wellspring, so it's definitely something we should consider. You know, is there a reason he didn't play it? Should we still try to play it? You know, things that consider. If we do decide to play it, though, I do think it's really good right now. I think the Wellspring card is just very versatile as well. Of course, this deck will struggle against cards that reset the hand, like Iono. It's kind of why we play a lower count of Iono in this deck, because we can't really afford to Iono, and we're trying to be aggressive. All Noctowl builds really struggle against Iono due to the fact that if you don't have like a clear setup to do Hoot Hoot into Noctowl, like in your next turn, if you get Iono'd, you're hoping to like get an Ultra Ball. But in this version, we kind of mitigate it with a Dawn, because Dawn can also add the Noctowl. But then that's also our supporter. So we have to take that in consideration that we can't like use Boss and also Dawn in the same turn. So we have to play a certain way when we're getting out. I'm not sure how relevant the Megazard is. Most of the time it just doesn't work. A lot of people are trying Megazard in this version specifically, and I just don't know if it works. I don't know if it's that good or not. A lot of the versions that were topping at the most recent regional did not play it, and I think that is for a reason. I don't think it's that good right now. It definitely have a spot in the future, but right now it's just not that good. The deck does struggle against more basic decks due to Wellspring attack not being the best against them, and also the Terapagos attack not being that easy to set up right at the beginning. You do have to have quite a bit of cards on your bench to be able to hit its max attack, which is 240. We have to have 8 cards on our bench, which is not the easiest to do on our which would be our second turn, because we can't even attack with the Terapagos our second turn. But we wouldn't even be able to get the energy on it anyways, because we don't play stuff like Crispin. But it is kind of hard to get all of those Pokemon out on your bench and keep them there without your opponent kind of disrupting it with like a jamming tower, knocking out your Area Zero, stuff like that. So we have to make sure that if we're going to go for those type of attacks, and we're going to use like the Terapagos to kind of pressure early. If we need to do that, we need to make sure that we're setting up our hand to where we can do that in the same turn, so our opponent can't disrupt us. And if we're playing stuff like Wellspring, you know, maybe it's not the best case to play Wellspring against those big basic decks, unless they're kind of playing a bunch of smaller Pokemon like a Monkey Dory or a Psyduck that we're trying to go after. Just something to consider. This deck, though, has multiple ways to beat pesky tech that is used against Zard, like the Badoo, like Cornerstone. We have a lot of ways to get past that because we have Noctowl, we have Dawn, we can play the Terapagos to beat the Cornerstone. You know, now that's not a problem. So definitely think this deck has the best answers to the tech cards that people are playing to beat Zard. But of course, we do have to think about what we're trading off with that, and that is some of the consistency pieces that we play in other versions. So here's kind of a notes layout on all of your current matchups. I took the top 10 decks that are on Limitless and just kind of went down the list and decided, you know, here's just kind of the basic notes for all the matchups. And I do that for all my how-to videos. A lot of people really like this part specifically. I've had a couple people come up to me in person and say, hey, your notes on the matchup is probably my favorite part because I just go back to it when I'm playing against stuff online and it helps me like learn the matchups more. So definitely going to be keeping these type of slides in all of my PowerPoints in the near future. But again, I'm not like a super expert on all of these decks. So if you think I say anything wrong, or if you think that kind of my perspective isn't 100% correct, make sure to let me know in the comments. And, you know, I've done a follow-up video on Pult before, you know, correcting some of the stuff that I messed up. So not afraid to do that. You know, it's all part about learning, but I think having a general understanding of all your matchups is very important. So for Gardevoir, we consider that a good matchup with Gardevoir being Dark Weak. As soon as a 2-prizer hits the board, evolve your Pokemon into Charizard and start taking prizes. Pidgeot or Noctowl setup makes this matchup easy. The Iono is just unable to stick against you if you play stuff like Pidgeot or if you set up correctly with Noctowl. Yes, the Iono can disrupt us later in the game, but Gardevoir likes to Iono early, mid, and late and kind of try to throw off your opponent as much as possible. You can't really do that against Zard early game. Now, the later in the game, which is kind of funny, of course, later in the game, Iono gets better, but it definitely gets better against Zard because we're missing some of those pieces. But if we already have the Pidgeot set up, it doesn't really matter. And now as for Pult, tough matchup. You want to evolve your Pokemon as quickly as possible so you're not getting bullied. Don't leave a lot of fluff on your board for Pult to pick off, and watch out for Ghost Pops. So you don't want to leave just basic Pokemon on your bench that don't need to be there. Don't play the Fez if you don't need to, because that's an easy target for stuff like Pult. Don't play some of the smaller Pokemon like a Moltres or Chi because they can just stack damage, and then also move damage around with Monkey Dory to get 2 to 3 turn prizes on you. You don't want that to happen. The Charizard mirror is a very weird mirror. If you play Wellspring, definitely gives you an advantage. You use that to get the ball rolling. If not, you want to try to set up your board to either pop Ghost and then attack, or just take out their key supporter Pokemon like the Pidgeot. You kind of just want to keep them off their natural flow of the game and kind of keep on yours. So whatever you have to do that, if you have to pop a Ghost to knock out a Pidgeot, do that. If you have to go after the Charmander lines with a Wellspring, do that. You know, whatever it takes to keep them off the pace that you're on, because if you are or both pacing at the same amount, it's literally going to depend on who gets to Briar. So we don't want that to happen. We don't want it to be a who gets to Briar first type of deal. We kind of want to keep them off pace and then start taking prizes off of them and then just get them in a hole to where they can't get out of. For the Gholdengo matchup, the Moltres or Chi-Yu are your keys to winning this matchup. Try to get as many KOs with 1-prizers as you can. They have a hard time not playing into Briar. So where Gholdengo doesn't really play like damage manipulators or plays anything that knocks out multiple Pokemon at once, they really have a hard time playing into Briar. So either they'll have to like take a 1-prizer when they don't need to, or they'll have to play in a certain way that doesn't allow you to Briar, that it really knocks off their balance because they want to just go 2-2-2. And we can prevent that with playing our 1-prizers, and then we also can prevent that with the Briar play. For the Grimmsnarl, try to not play into Devo if possible. Battle Cages are really good tech against this deck. This deck is more aggressive than you are, so try to keep up with their pace. And then just don't let them run over you and bully you. I'm going to go over some key tech cards at the later part of this video, and Battle Cage is one of them. If you really struggle against this matchup and you don't know what to do against it, consider playing Battle Cage. You know, maybe that's something that will help you further into this matchup, because Battle Cage just turns off Monkey Dories for putting anything on their bench. It knocks out the Shadow Bullet attack, doing the 30 on your bench. You know, not a lot of people want to play that Shaman because it's just kind of an empty stadium spot. So consider the Battle Cage if that's something that you struggle with. With the Wellspring, which is, of course, Terror Box, set up your board enough to where you're not losing after one Wellspring attack, survive the Wellspring attack, and disrupt their hand. So you pretty much just want to make sure that you're not losing off the first turn they attack. If you can make sure that you don't do that, you know, after that point, they really have a hard time knocking out the Zard unless they play certain tech like the Iron Leaves or like the Mega Mawile, and we can really disrupt their hand from getting to those pieces if we're playing stuff like Pidgeot, playing going get like an Iono, we can go get an Unfair Stamp, just stuff like that to really set their pace, because if they miss a turn of attaching energy or getting an attacker up, then you're caught right back up with them. For the Ceruledge, we want to set up Zard early. They have a really hard time knocking out high HP Pokemon early in the game. Make sure you are ahead of the prizes most of the match. Don't play into the Briar. So this is one of those decks that does play Briar. So what we want to do is we want to make sure that we are pacing in front of them, and then maybe doing a setup play with like a Ghost to play into our Briar and not let them play into their Briar. Kind of what you want to do against Ceruledge. It should be a pretty straightforward matchup because they really have a hard time knocking out a Zard early in the game. For the Raging Bolt, don't let them set up a Tail Mask attack, and you should be able to pace them well. You win this matchup a lot of times with Briar, where it's another aggressive deck that's trying to take 2/2/2. They're going to get in that position where they're going to play into Briar, or you can pop a Ghost to play them into Briar. As long as they don't set up a Tail Mask and are knocking out your Charizards easily, they can't leave a lot of energy on board, so it's pretty easy for you to just pace with them and then not just lose. For Joltik, it's very important that you set up your two prizers as quickly as possible to prevent getting hands to death. Another matchup where you may need to rely on Briar. Again, another matchup where they're going 2/2/2 or they're trying to. But as long as you can get your two prizers set up, they have a hard time knocking out the Zard. Now, they can knock out the Pidgeot very easily because of weakness, so we do need to consider that because they play a lot of Gust. So this may be one of the times you don't play your Pidgeot line if you're playing it. Maybe you have to, you know, just look at your board state, evaluate what you need. But we try to not play into that because they can just knock out your Pidgeot at any time. For the Mega Absol, we want to stack Ghost to knock out the big Mega Pokemon. You usually play Klefki, so sit on Klefki until your board state is good enough to start attacking. This deck struggles against Klefki because all of its basic Pokemon, so your Draw is a basic Pokemon, the Pecharunt, moving the Yveltal to the active is a basic ability, Monkey Dory is a basic ability, and the Psyduck is all basic abilities that they use, and Latios. So if we have a Klefki up, it's really hard for them to get set up. What they usually try to do is attach an energy, do Turbo Energize, and then try to set up the Absol as quickly as possible so they can start pressuring you. But we're getting at least 2 turns where they either have to deal with the Klefki or they have to set up their board enough to where they can get around the Klefki and like Boss. It kind of favors us because they're not drawing a lot because they can't use like Kangaskong ability to do the draw. But then again, we also have a hard time knocking out their Pokemon, so we have to make sure that we rely on this stuff. And they do play outs to Klefki because they are expecting it, so just be aware of that. And for the Zoroark, just simple note that quick search is better than trade. Just outpace them and don't let them get multiple Charmander KOs. Don't let them do the Darmanitan spread attack on you, and you should be fine. You can knock out a Zoroark whenever you want to because you play stuff like the Ghost that you can combo with. And then you always have the advantage, in my opinion, because quick search is always going to be better than trade. So here I'm just going to go over some of the gameplay that I had on stream with the deck. I'm playing a version that plays the Wellspring. Definitely think you should try out the version that just won with the Terapagos. I do think it's a very good version. I've been playing with it some in paper, and it's very good. This is just kind of what I play with Wellspring, and I kind of want to go over my thought process, what I think about when I'm playing the deck, so on and so forth. So here we are playing against Greninja that's playing the Noctowls, which is very, very funny. But this is just kind of consider you're playing a Noctowl deck, right? So right here, we're setting up the Fang Rotom. We have a Pidgey. We have a Charmander. We're just going to set up Noctowl into Hoot Hoot. And I was considering not playing another Noctowl because I do only have one Charmander, which kind of scares me. But then I go ahead and boss just because that's what I have in my hand. And all we're trying to do here is slow down our opponent to where we can get all of our big key Pokemon up. As you can see, I also have the Dusknoir in hand, so if I can get a Rare Candy Dusclops, or excuse me, Rare Candy Duskull, that's something else I can rely on. But I have 2 Noctowl, and I hate when I have 2 Noctowl in my hand because I feel like every time I do, I just get Iono'd. But that's not the case in this specifically. We also see that our opponent's playing the Wellspring, so it's kind of good on us to boss them, so now they can't just retreat, play like Crystal Crispin, and then start knocking out stuff like our Charmander or Pidgey. Definitely something to consider. He's going to go ahead and Noctowl here. Again, like I mentioned in my notes, playing against the Noctowl decks, you just want to make sure that you don't lose in like the first couple of turns by getting knocked out with the Wellspring attack. I think bossing and putting a Pokemon in the active that is just unable to retreat without attaching or using a card like Switch is pretty good in preventing stuff like that. We just want to make them use their energy resources if we can. He does have the air balloon, which is very funny, but he doesn't have the Wellspring set up. So he does have to do the Shinobi Blade, which allows him to just add a card. So that's pretty good for us. We don't mind taking the damage here, and we get to keep the Wellspring. There's just no way that he's going to knock out the Wellspring here, so let's just do the Noctowl plays. And as you'll see, I'm kind of looking over what all he added. Then I'm going to go ahead and do my Noctowl. I do have 2 Ultra Balls, or 1 Ultra Ball in hand, I think. Yeah, I have 1 Ultra Ball, another Noctowl, Buddy. So right now, I'm just kind of trying to figure out how I want to set up my board specifically. So right here, I decided to get rid of another Ultra Ball, and then decide what I want to pick. I've added the Rare Candy. So I'm trying to decide if I want to go to Zard, if I want to go straight Pidgey. I decide to go into the Charizard and get that set up. And as you can see with my setup here, and again, this is kind of the first time I'm playing this deck, so you have to kind of look over me. I probably do some missteps, but I set up here the Wellspring attack, which is kind of weird because they have a big Pokemon in front of me. Why would I want to do that? But what I do here is I set up the Lilies to give me 8 cards, so I have more of an opportunity to see more stuff to set up. And then from here, I go ahead and do the Torrential, and I knock out the other Hoot Hoot. So he doesn't have an easy way of just adding whatever he wants to. He is going to get the Fez draw, but with this, he can't just get whatever he wants off a Hoot Hoot play. And, what's he going to do? Boss and knock out, Charizard? He can't do that. He can try to, do the 3 energy attack to knock out a bunch of things. But if you all were wondering, yes, my Pidgeot was prized. This version was playing a 1-1 line. So it was prized. I did not get to go into it last turn, or I would have, because I do have the Rare Candy and Ultra Ball in my hand. But he does get the reversal energy that lets it count for 3. So he is going to get to do the Mirage, which sucks because I finally did get that Pidgeot EX off the prizes. So now I'm kind of stuck. I don't really have a lot to add, but because I Lilies, I do have a lot of cards in my hand. So I'm not feeling, the best, but I'm definitely not feeling the worst. I go ahead and set up draw with Fez because I do understand I'm going to probably have to draw quite a bit. And just kind of go over my hand, seeing what I want to do. I have, probably 12 cards in my hand. I think you can't see an Ultra Ball. So I have quite a bit in my hand. I go ahead and set up a Crispin to get energy on the Noctowl. And then go ahead and set up just adding the Pidgey back onto the bench so I can go into it next turn. And then I set up a play to attack with Zard because I did do that 100 with the Wellspring. So now I do get to knock that out. So, now it's 3-4. I am pacing him well. And also, unless he does something like, um, let me just cover. I decided to move my uh, camera finally, as you all can see. But let me just cover that. And you all can see my hand better now too. But I've set up my hand to where I can just go rare candy, Pidgeot, and then go into the Briar Play if I need to, if he gets two here. Because as what I'm seeing on the field specifically, which is, you probably are thinking, well, it's kind of shady that you don't have another Charmander. I know what my opponent is playing with the Greninja. I know he has nothing right now that threatens Zard. He's going to go after this. What I was thinking is he's probably going to try to do a play to knock out a Wellspring and then like another one prizer to get him to 1. But even if he does that, all I do is go into Pidgeot, Iono, knock out the Fez, and then what does he do? He has to hope for a top deck boss, and then at that point, if you got it, you got it. But I was playing to a point where if that's his only win con and I Iono him to 1, my Charizard's not getting out anything he plays. So that's kind of my understanding, is he doesn't really have anything to knock out the Zard. And my opponent just sets up a Hoot because he's trying to build his board back up. Because again, this is a deck that relies on rare candy. So if you're playing a lot of rare candies, you're going to have like your Pidgeot, your Hoot set up. And he didn't really have the chance to do that, where he was kind of aggressive to start out with, because a lot of people think, well, if you're aggressive against the Zard, it'll play out for you very well. And as you can see here, we're setting up our Pidgeot. We'll see what we add. I can't quite remember what we add. I know I have like quite a bit that I can play, and I go ahead and decide to play the Area Zero now because I don't think he can really benefit off it more than I can. So I set up another Charmander just in case he does find a way to knock something out. In retrospective, what I probably should have done instead of knocking out this Fez is maybe knocking out the Wellspring, because then it also has to have a Terra Pokemon before he can use the Hoot. But honestly, if he's drawing 3 and he has 11 cards, he's probably going to have Rare Candy Greninja into the Terra Greninja. So the Fez is probably the correct play, but it's definitely something to consider. And so since my opponent didn't do anything last turn and didn't knock anything out, I can go ahead and go after another 2-prizer. And at this point, I have checkmate. There's really not a lot my opponent can do to win the game. I have Pidgeot with Quick Search. So with Charizard, you're going to get in a lot of these positions where you just have a checkmate, where your opponent really can't do anything. Doesn't matter what they do, because at the end of the day, they're going to just add off the Quick Search and then just win the game, right? And that's what I put my opponent in. He knows he can't knock out the Pidgeot and the Charizard. You have to knock out both for it to, pan out for you, because my Charizard can knock out anything you set up. And then also, I can search anything I want to win the game. So if you can't get past that, the game's just over. And so for the second game here, I'm pretty sure I'm playing against the Absol. As you see, he does start out with Monkey Dory. I do have the Dawn, which is very good, but I do go first. So I just go ahead and set up. And I'm trying to decide which supporter I want to use. I think I decided to get rid of the Dawn just because Iono is going to let me see more cards. And I only have 2 cards in my hand. So I go ahead and decide to play more of a Terra, version into this by getting Hoot. I'm pretty sure a Pidgey, and then knocked out. And I'm just going and doing a price check, see what I got. I still have another Dawn if I need it, with like a knocked out play. But I just go ahead and set this up, and I know I can either knocked out and get something done, or Iono if I need to, right? Or if he doesn't Iono me, right? So I figured the Iono is just a little bit better than the Dawn in that specific scenario. He does go ahead and Lilies, and he attaches to the Monkey Dory. He's probably looking for either a Cornerstone setup, or he's looking for Absol. The Kangaskhan is probably not that great in this matchup. And he did not get the Turbo Energize, which is great for us. That just means we have an extra turn. So at this point, I kind of have to decide what I want to do. I can't knock out anything with the Terra, the Wellspring Ogerpon. So now I have to decide how I want to set up my board. you know, kind of what my game plan is, what my opponent's going to do to try to beat me. And I'm pretty sure I misplay a little bit in this game, but then I decided to go ahead and add the Dawn because it did end up being better because my opponent didn't do anything. So maybe I should have just got rid of the Iona, right? And then added something else with a knocked out. You know, probably a miss like play in my mind. Just me not thinking my plays completely through. But I set up Charmeleon and another Charmander so that my opponent can't just knock one of those out and then I lose. So just something to consider. You know, maybe I should have kept that Dawn. It was probably better. And then in retrospective, I'm kind of more Iono pilled, right? So definitely need to consider your supporter plays in this deck. You know, is Dawn better? Is the Iono better? You know, if you're playing Lilies, is it better? In that perspective that we just saw, it was definitely the Dawn play. I shouldn't have got rid of it. But our opponent finally does get the Arven, so he's going to do the Turbo Energize play. And you did see him get the Trolley, and he didn't do anything with it, which I thought was kind of weird. But I think he's trying to set up a play to where he just has like Cornerstone and another card, and then pretty much saying, okay, you don't really have anything to deal with it. But what I am playing in this deck specifically is I am playing the Megazord, and I'm also playing Wellspring. So I don't really care about the Cornerstone. If he wants to set it up, so be it. And I'm also going to go ahead and set up a Duskull so that if he does set up that Cornerstone, I can also do a Wellspring attack into the Curse Blast. So from here, I'm just considering what I want to play, what all I want to use. I'm really thinking about my plays here because he does have the Cornerstone. I go ahead and do the Infernal Rain, and then I decide to just set it up on my Charmander and my Charizard instead of the Wellspring. I didn't think it was worth doing the Wellspring attack at this point, and then I just go ahead and Iono him. That was a really weird animation. I don't know why I'd done that. But I decided to go ahead and Iono him because I saw him add the Trolley and he didn't do anything with it. So I was like, well, if he wants to play this lower Pokemon base, then I'm going to just corner him. And then when I'm ready to play, I'm going to play. Because this deck also does like a corner-like stuff, but he didn't play any of the cards. So I decided to just disrupt his hand and then corner him. But he ends up getting the Trolley anyways and then doing the Trolley after I play Area Zero, which is very funny. That worked out for him. But, you know, sometimes it works out, sometimes it don't. But he's going to go ahead and do the Subjugating Chains here, set up the Yveltal, and then he decides to switch into the Mega Absol. And he's going to Adrenabrain the damage, I'm assuming, to my Duskull. Actually, I did not think he was going to do that. And then he's going to just do the Vessel play and then go ahead and knock out my Wellspring with the Claw of Darkness attack and look at my hand. And I don't remember what he discards, but let's see what he discards here. He decides to discard the Lilies. And I think that's incorrect. I have Dusknoir, Rare Candy, and a Briar in my hand. All of those are like pretty high value cards. The Lilies lets me draw more, but like I could just go get another Lilies with Pidgeot. I can't really get another Briar or another Dusknoir. I'd have to get like use a Night Stretch or another resource, right? So I think that was kind of just whatever on his point. I go ahead and I do set up my Dusknoir just so he can't bully it with the Monkey Dory. And then I think here I kind of struggle with what I want to do. I go ahead and decide to get the Fez. In this version specifically, I was not playing the Klefki, so that is something important to consider. If I'm not playing the Klefki, then I can't stop the Psyduck play. So you have to think about stuff like that. You know, Klefki is probably very good right now, so I would definitely consider it in your versions. But I go ahead and decide to get the boss because there is quite a bit that I can just knock out here. And the Petra Run is very good to kind of swap back and forth with your Pokemon in this deck specifically. So I decided to just go after the Petra Run because it's going to prevent him from doing the Run Aaron, Yveltal into Absol play like they like to do. And also it helps them build up damage with their Monkey Dories that they can move around. So at this point, my opponent is going to try to set up 60 damage just to knock out the Charizard. So he set up double Monkey Dory here. He also does Turbo Energize, I think he also tries to set up the Cornerstone. I don't know why you try to set up the Cornerstone at this point, because you know that Charizard's going to play 2 to 3 bosses at least. If you're playing Prime, you're probably going to play 2. If you're not playing Prime, you're going to play at least 3, which leads me to do a 2-2-2 line. So, not quite sure why he tries to set up the Cornerstone here this late. I do think that's incorrect. But we go ahead and quick search. As you can see how beneficial it is just to quick search every game. I think even if you're playing the Terra version, you should definitely be playing Pidgeot. It's so good. I just go ahead and decide to grab another boss. Let me see what I do. I think there's a chance I misplay here. Nope, I don't. Okay. So I go after the Psyduck like I am supposed to, because now if he brings up one of those Mega Pokemon, I have 3 prizes. I can just pop the Dusknoir, and then that's the game right there. The highest attack his Absol can have is 360, and I do 240 plus the 130, which is 370. So there's nothing that's going to be able to prevent it from getting knocked out unless he goes after my Dusknoir specifically. And as we can see here, he's just going to go ahead and set up Latios so he can retreat, because now he was missing that Pecharunt that allowed him to do stuff like that. And at this point, he just attacks me. He doesn't have what he needs. And I think I kind of play longer than I'm supposed to, but all I have to do here is just pop the Dusknoir and then attack. I think I even add the other boss. Like, I'm just thinking too far ahead, right? And that's important to think, like, you know, sometimes we just think too far ahead. Like, there's no point in me having this boss. And I even realized it. I had stopped myself. I was like, wait, I have game. What am I doing? So then I pop the Dusknoir, puts him down to 3, and then I do the 270, and then that's it. That's the game. So that's kind of a walkthrough of how you're supposed to be playing specifically Charizard. My version is a little outdated, so definitely look into the versions that I played in the past with the Terapagos. I do think that version definitely has more merit, but I also think the Wellspring is very good. So I definitely think you should test with it, if anything. And then here's just some tech cards to consider when you're building your list. I mentioned earlier the Battle Cage. The Battle Cage is very good against those Monkey Dory decks, those decks that spread damage, which Charizard does struggle with. The thing I'm finding with is it's hard to find a place for it, because you do like the stadiums that you play, like the Area Zero. Some lists play Artisan that they rely on. So definitely think it's, you know, a good card to tech if you are specifically struggling against those decks. I also think Blowtorch is fairly good right now, because it can beat those other stadiums, those other tool cards, and you already play the Fire Energy, so it kind of fits well. Actually lost to a Zard at this past challenge playing the Blowtorch. Just Blowtorch my jamming tower, ended up playing a Maximum Bell and knocking out something when I wasn't expecting it, which was very big. It's definitely a card I would consider. Of course, the Terapagos. When I was making this video, I thought that the Terapagos was very good, and then here this past weekend, we just had a bunch of decks playing the Terapagos do well. So I think this card is very good. It's a card that can do 240 damage. It's a big basic. It's also a Terra Pokemon, so it pairs well with your Noctowls. It also pairs well with the Duskull stuff. Terapagos Dusknoir Noctowl was its own deck in the past, so like it just makes sense in this deck. It's a very good card. The Briar, of course, also pairs well with the Terapagos, pairs well with the Charizard, helping you get those 3 prize turn wins very easily. This card fits so well because you play Pidgeot, you play Noctowl. It's just a good card to have. And then, of course, the Klefki. As you saw with the Mega Absol, if I had the Klefki, that matchup actually got even easier, which my opponent did have more of a slower time, and then he kind of got caught in setting up the Cornerstone, which, as you can see, I can handle Cornerstone very well with this deck. It's not a problem at all like it used to be in the past. It definitely can surprise you and can still beat you, so you have to prepare for it. But if you play stuff to prepare for it, and then you also play stuff like Klefki to beat the other pesky ability Pokemon, you should have a fairly easy time. Now, that's not to say Klefki beats Cornerstone. That's not what I'm saying. But Klefki does help you beat stuff that are paired with the Cornerstone, like the Kangaskong draw, like the Monkey Dory moving the damage, the Psyduck not letting you pop your Ghost. That's definitely where Klefki shines. So our final ratings for this deck. What do we feel for the deck rating? So as I do in all of my videos for the how-tos, I do break it down in a 5 different spread with an overall how difficult I think the deck is and what I think the ceiling of the deck is. In the past, I have rated Dragapult a 4 out of 5. I have rated Mega Absol a 3.5 out of 5. And then as you see here, I've rated Charizard a 4.5 out of 5, being the highest rated deck that we've looked at so far. And you may be thinking that, that's crazy. Pult's had a lot more, results than Zard. Well, I'm telling you, this new version of Zard is probably going to start having the same type of results that Pult had in previous metas. I think this deck is very good right now. As far as for its ratings, the consistency definitely has a problem with consistency because you do play a lot of one-of cards. But once you get the ball rolling, your consistency, of course, is a 5 out of 5. But at the very beginning of the game, your consistency is bad. And there are some hands where you just cannot play the game because you play so many Pokemon, you play so many different types of Pokemon that sometimes your hands just aren't manageable. Your matchup spread, you have a 4 out of 5. There are some pesky tech cards that can still cause you trouble, like the Cornerstone, maybe even like a Crustle, if you're not playing certain cards. So it is important that we are aware of those cards. But overall, we have a very good matchup spread. For your draw power, we just don't draw a lot in this deck. Besides like our quick search, I think the only thing that we really do is quick search and Noctowl, which makes it automatically a draw power of 3 out of 5, where normally this deck would just have like a 1 out of 5. It really has no way to draw besides like a supporter, and I don't like counting that really as draw power. But because we play the Pidgeot, because we play the Noctowl, it gives us, enough of a draw to really, keep things moving. Then, of course, attack power. The attack power of this deck is just absolutely nasty when we're playing with Briar, we're playing Wellspring, or the Terapagos. Our Charizard attack only gets better and better and better as the game goes. Probably the best attack power in the game right now. And then the recovery, where we're playing Noctowl, where we're playing Pidgeot, we have the recovery that we need, that if our board gets broken, a lot of times we can just come back, stall our opponent with like a Klefki, or stall them with bossing something they don't want the active, and just building our board right back up because we're able to search all the time. So, like I said, overall, this deck's probably 4.5 out of 5. I think this deck is like the second or third best deck right now. I think it's very good. If you like playing Charizard, now's your time to play it before it rotates. Definitely a good time to pick up this deck if you've never played it before. It's definitely in a good spot in the meta. And I think the difficulty is only a 3 out of 5. I don't think it's that difficult. I do think knowing what to grab with your Noctowl or knowing what to grab with Pidgeot does come up a lot in your matchups. Like you saw earlier when I got rid of the Dawn, I ended up having to add the Dawn with the Noctowl because I ended up needing the Dawn. And that's just something that you'll have to learn with repetition in certain game states. But I don't think it's, impossibly difficult like some of the decks are right now. There are some decks that are just really, really, really hard to master. I don't think this is one of them. Just a 3 out of 5 on the difficulty scale. And of course, the ceiling. I do think this deck is probably second or third right now, so I definitely have it as an S tier, and I'm not the only one that feels the way about this deck. There's a lot of pro players that think this deck is in a very good spot. Unfortunately, we don't really have a regional this month in the States. I think we do have either a special event or a regional later in this month, and then we have Toronto in January. So that's when we're going to see, what this deck is all about, how it performs, but I do expect it to be a good part of the meta. But yeah, that's the video. Charizard, it's back. It's been back, but now it's back, right? It's back to that menacing threat that it's been so long ago. We are back to that spot where Charizard is a very good pick, and if you are considering playing it, definitely is now the time to play it before it rotates. But that's the how-to. If you all have any questions, comments, concerns about Charizard, about the list that we're playing, about some questions, some additional questions you have, let me know in the comments. I reply to every comment, and I like every comment. So if you're saying something, it's going to be seen, and I'm going to let you know, hey, I saw your comment. Here's what I think about, your question, what my answer is, stuff like that. I love engaging with you all. So definitely something that I'm going to be looking forward in the comments. Let me know what some other decks you all want me to review. I know someone a couple days before I posted this video asked for the Charizard, and I was already working on it. So that was kind of cool. But if there's a deck that you want me to go over, I'm happy to do that. I really don't have a set deck list that I'm doing. I'm going to be doing one every other week. So I'm going to be covering a good portion of the decks, but some decks will be missed unless you all mention it. So if there is a deck that you'd love for me to cover, please let me know. I'm willing to cover any and all decks. This also helps me practice and get better at the game because I do play these decks often, some 4 to 5 hours in a span of playing it. So I do get to learn a lot of these decks. So I'm definitely willing to try just about anything that's meta related. But yeah, thank you all for watching, tuning in, all the comments, love. I appreciate you all. But with that, we'll cut it out. Peace.